All right. Well, welcome everybody to this year's Career of Futures event. I'm really happy to be here and um, sort of kick this off. Um, my name is Trygve Fasti. For those of you who don't know me, you probably all do. I am currently the department head in product design, but I'm also one of the regular faculty here in the Department of Product Design. And we have our panelists who all have introduced themselves to you in a moment. We are going to paste into the chat the UO land acknowledgement text as well as the panelist bios so that you can all refer to those. And like Cece just mentioned, if you keep your microphones muted and your screens off, since it's being recorded, that would be wonderful during the panel discussion. And then if you have questions, you can ask them at the end. There'll be a Q&A session after we're done kind of like going through the regular discussion. And when it's time to ask questions, you can do the raise hand feature, and then we will try and get to everyone's questions, and we should have plenty of time for all of that. We have with us today three of our alumni who are off doing really exciting design work. And I had the pleasure of having all of them actually in one of my classes at some point during my time here. And you know, it's funny for me, you know, being an instructor, I see, you know, so many students, and sometimes there's even students that kind of slip through, just depending on if I'm, like right now, I'm teaching fewer classes because I'm department head. So, you know, it's always a shame when I don't get to know people as they go through the program, but it's also really rewarding to see our graduates go off and do really exciting stuff. And so we're really happy to have everyone here today and kind of share some of their experiences with you all. So without further ado, why don't we have each of the panelists introduce themselves? And why don't we just start in the order that everyone joined in to the Zoom earlier today. And you guys can just briefly introduce yourself, and you can tell us when you attended the U of O and where you currently work and what your role is in your work, and any other, like, you know, interesting little background things that kind of got you from the U of O to where you are. And then we'll just start with some of the questions after that. You want to start, Becky?
Sure. So my name is Becky Carachetti. I went from University of Oregon from 2012 to 2016. I graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Product Design. I did what was at the time an optional 5th year up in Portland, and that was absolutely amazing. Currently, I am a user experience researcher and designer working in the labs at Intel. So that's kind of like the futuristic R&D part of the company. And my job is to work alongside engineers who are developing the technology that's 3 to 5 years out for market. So stuff that literally doesn't exist generally at the beginning of a project. And their job is sort of to figure out how it works from an algorithmic or a hardware standpoint. And my job is to represent sort of the human side of that. So understanding the values and needs of users and making sure those are sort of reflected in the technologies as they're being developed.
Sean, do you want to go next?
Yeah. So I'm Sean. I went to the U of O. I can't remember when I started, but I graduated in 2011. I do remember, though, that I was in the first product design class the very first day the program existed. It was a very exciting time. I remember Kirsten was teaching the class, and she was actually pregnant at the time, and she had to leave halfway through because she had her baby, and John Arndt took over teaching the class. We learned how to design things out of zinc and learned all about blow molding and all that fun stuff. And I still actually reference the book from that class constantly. Yeah, so, and one of the first classes through the BFA, like Becky said, when it was an optional 5th year. And during that year, I interned at GroveMade. I was a production intern. So I was just sanding iPhone cases. They were making iPhone cases. They had just started the business. It was a fun little kind of startup, direct to consumer, actually physically hands-on making product. And that's what I really liked about down in Eugene was the physical side of design, and then getting up to Portland, of course, the more conceptual research-based side of design. And so I've been at Grove for almost 11 or 12 years now. I feel like I've always gotten in places where when they're starting. So product design when it started, I helped co-found a startup with another friend, and then Grove made when it started, and I've been there this whole time. So yeah, the company has changed from an iPhone case company to home office accessories. And the pandemic has been kind to the company, but not kind to the world. So it's been an interesting juxtaposition for sure.
And I'm Maddie Landis-Croft. I graduated from the UO in 2018. I started in 2014, and I graduated with a BA in product design. After I graduated, I moved to New York and I took a job like Sean doing a lot of sanding. I was a woodshop assistant for a small furniture design company called Egg Collective. And after my time there doing a lot of sanding, I started a job at West Elm where I was the casual seating designer and then later the outdoor furniture designer. And in January, I started a new position at Parts and Labor Design where I am an FF&E designer working on custom furniture and lighting for hospitality design projects.
Right. So it's a pretty diverse group. I was actually really excited to have this group of designers with us today because everyone is kind of working in different areas and aspects of design. And that's one of the things that I think is great about this particular field is it is so varied in terms of like the types of work that you do, the opportunities, and also even just like what your day is like on a daily basis. It could be, tends to be a bit of variety day to day, but I thought it would be really interesting to just hear briefly from each of you, like what your, and again, like this might change every day, but like what your daily routine looks like, or, like, the kinds of things you find yourself doing in your work. That's just like, oh, my job is like, I show up and I do this for 8 hours or however long. And then, yeah, just share that a little bit with the group. Whoever wants to go first, just jump on in.
If we just keep the order, I would say my daily tasks are probably a little bit unique in that it is very much heavily a research job in addition to design. So my day looks like a lot of time on computers and a lot of meetings, but often we're involved in sort of the problem definition space of really big topics. So one of our primary research domains is a mixed reality application for elementary education. So kind of applying AI to that space and seeing how we can enhance education through play. So that has involved an incredible variety of tasks from, designing interviews and going out and talking to parents and educators to see what their values are, to building a video game to get a prototype in front of kids. Sometimes we're in the lab, like custom 3D printing brackets to hold all sorts of pieces of technology. There was a point where they called me the wizard, puppeteering a virtual agent for kids to interact with. So gosh, there's been video game design, there's been sketching, there's been 3D modeling and 3D printing. There's been a lot of working with engineers and doing my best to understand what they're after, but also taking, more or less functional technical prototypes and kind of adding another level of polish to those so that we can then take them out in the field, get people's feedback on them. We often take that information, put it into a presentation and give that to upper management, give it to other people in the department, give it to other business groups around Intel who might, adopt something and actually put it to market. There's also, of course, been software design, user interface design. So it's a pretty broad variety of things compared to other user experience designers I have talked to. And again, there is that big research component. So we also do a lot of publications. We have a big conference that we're presenting coming up pretty quickly here. There's a lot of patent filing that happens because, again, R&D part of a company. So a lot of writing and researching, but also reaching out to users and letting them try things that we have prototyped by hook or by crook. So it's a pretty varied and fun job. and a lot of collaborating with people with completely different skill sets to mine.
Yeah.
I would agree with Becky. Like, it's always so different and so varied. For me, I've been really lucky because Grove has been so flexible during the pandemic, and recently, like, working from home wasn't the norm before 2 years ago, and so our products were doing well, but then all of a sudden working from home became the norm, and then our products became very in demand. And this last 2 years have been like every day is a trial and like figuring out how to run the company, and how to scale the company to meet demand, and how to, you know, be less of like a maker company and designing products with a maker standpoint and designing them more for mass market. And so we've been shifting our focus a little bit in that way. So every day is like, there are fires to put out, of course, but there's been a lot of like really amazing collaboration lately, with not only individuals who are working from home and those of us at the shop who are also working from home a lot, but with like influencers and like minds in the industry, like the people that actually manufacture the sit stand desks, for instance, and things like that. So like really is like starting to kind of expand our scope a little bit. So every day has been that. But for me, the nitty gritty is Rhino sketching and laser cutting cardboard and paper models and hot gluing stuff together. So I am sort of a fast and dirty designer. I like to create a lot really quickly and try and test and fail a lot to find the right solution. And so every day is a mixture of, like I said, hand sketching, hand modeling, 2D Rhino, 3D Rhino. And then what's fun about Grove is we're a direct to consumer company. So we start with the user and we end with the user. We do our research, we design, we engineer, then we start manufacturing it, and then we ship it. So we control all the touch points. And so that's been fun. At bigger companies, it's hard to steer a ship like that. It's hard to interact with customers directly, but as a designer, I'm actually able to talk to individual people who have bought our products. And I can't always go to their homes and see their offices or go to their businesses, but a lot of times I'm just like looking at pictures or I'm doing video calls and chatting with people. And so it's been really nice. Every day I'm experiencing what they're experiencing, and we're all experiencing it right now. So that's been fun.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds really cool, Sean. So yeah, my day to day is similar. Lots of Rhino, lots of hand sketching, but it's definitely a little bit different in that I am working in an interior design firm, it's a new thing for me. You know, I worked as essentially only a furniture designer for about 3.5 years. So now I'm learning how to sort of design furniture and design lighting in a way that takes into account like a general space rather than just designing a piece of furniture that sort of exists on its own. So depending on the point in the project that I'm in, I might be working on sort of the concept. So pulling a bunch of mood images, talking to the client about the kind of space that they want, the kind of furniture that they want, and the kind of function that they want for the space. And you know, if I'm not doing concepting, I'm probably in Rhino, like modeling dining chairs, modeling banquettes, like testing a whole bunch of different materials, how they look on the pieces of furniture, how they look in comparison with like the floor or the wallpaper. So yeah, it's definitely been a very fun transition to learn about this sort of new world and how my product design skills sort of fit into a different industry. It's been very fun, yeah. And we do about like 80% custom furniture. So the other super fun part of my job is getting to pick, you know, pieces of furniture that I haven't designed, which is something that is totally new to me other than doing it in my own apartment, you know? So it's definitely been a learning experience, and I'm super excited to keep learning more. It's been fun after having the same job for a very long time to finally get to bust into something new. That's what I love about design is getting to learn new things all the time. And I'm definitely getting to do that now.
Great. Thank you all for your answers. And so the next question that I was going to ask is, you know, what do you wish you had known, or you know, maybe thought about when you were still in school? And what advice would you give students that are currently in the program in terms of, like, you know, thinking about things that would be helpful when you graduate, or just things that you wish you had thought about or known about, or any kind of advice along those lines?
I remember in like my last year of school having a degree of anxiety, wondering, you know, how, because I transferred into the program, I'd been in it for about 2.5 years by the time I graduated, like how on earth I was going to have picked up enough skills to be able to do, you know, just the incredible variety of jobs that this program can lead into, just as you can see by the variety of speakers here. And if I could magic wand, poof, go tell my old self something, it would be that I think one of the big strengths that the program has to offer is it does give you, you know, access to a variety of different things, but it's sort of the thinking that underlines or underlies all those skills. So the ability to pick up new things and run with it. You know, the sort of design thinking, strategic, creative problem solving approach. I think if you can pick up that sort of thinking in those strengths, and also the ability to take feedback about your work, you know, and not maybe get too personally attached to things. I think the program does a really good job of fostering that. Sometimes when I work with people who didn't go through design school, you learn how to be a little more political in your feedback, but being able to be open and be flexible, sort of those underlying thinking skills at the end of the day are going to serve you much better than maybe worrying about like, oh gosh, I have to understand aluminum manufacturing, but also woodworking and also CAD. And also I a bit naively thought like, you know, school is where, okay, like I've got it, I'm ready to go. But the learning continues just as much after school, if not on a more accelerated pace. And you'll learn the things you need to know to do okay if you have those sort of foundational thinking skills.
I think for me, I would have not worked as hard in school. Like I feel like I worked too hard. I worked myself too hard. I was too much of a perfectionist back then. Like you have a very limited amount of time in a term or a quarter to get your projects done. And oftentimes for me, it felt like I needed to like create something really polished really quick. And I didn't allow myself time to like I said, my last answer, get dirty or like explore the possibilities. And so like not like making too many decisions too quickly, but kind of feeling it out a little bit more. Still working fast because you have a limited amount of time, but not trying to like be so perfect with every drawing and with every model and with every idea. It's like college is the time to fail, because when you fail in the real world, there's like real world consequences. But failure in the real world is still good. Like you should still not be afraid of that, because you're going to learn something every single time you make a mistake. And mistakes aren't really mistakes. They're just, you know, things that lead you towards the final outcome. And so in school, I would have focused more on like not being afraid of drawing a bunch of really bad drawings or making a bunch of really bad models, because it's the bad ones that lead to the really good ones, instead of just jumping in and trying to make something super good right away. So that's what I would change if I could, you know, wave Becky's magic wand and wizard myself back.
Also enjoy the fact you don't have to convince people 3 steps up management that you need $50,000 or whatever to keep investigating
no
something.
bureaucracy.
Sorry to interrupt, just that's enjoy that.
No, it's true. It's like you in school, you have a lot of freedom to sort of explore these crazy ideas that you have. And I think it's definitely like, that's the place to do it. You know, you've got this idea for this wild chair that would never work in real life. You know, you should do it in school, because that's where you've got the space and the time to do it. And I would definitely, if I could go back, try and take as much advantage of all of those different facilities that I had access to as physically possible. Because in the real world, there's no just lovely wood shop that you can go in and use whenever you want, or ceramic studios. It's much different. But yeah, like Becky was saying, just learning to not be precious about your work, I think, is like so super important. You don't always have the best idea, and your grand idea for a project maybe isn't what the other people on the team are looking for. It's really important to sort of learn to work collaboratively and learn to be diplomatic about feedback, and how you take feedback and how you apply it to your work, because design is like highly collaborative in a professional setting, and it's important to sort of develop a thick skin, because it's not I don't know, people aren't always going to tell you what you want to hear. Sometimes people are going to be like, I hate this, and you have to just be kind of like, okay, learn when to fight for things, and learn when to sort of be like, all right, I'll make those changes. But yeah.
Yeah, I think something too that is interesting is like your job isn't necessarily to answer the question, it's to create a bunch of answers to the question, and then lean on your team to help figure out like which answers that you've created work well together, or which answer is the correct answer, or there might be multiples, so which one do you go with? And that's a huge part of it. So designers, oftentimes we're just generating like ideas and solutions and all sorts of things, and then it's our team that helps guide us to the final product.
I often give talks around the company on creativity, and I've used the same slide deck a couple times, and literally have a giant slide that just says bad ideas are good, because the ideas that generate volume and don't let the perfectionism hold you back. That's been a huge thing that I've had to learn in my career. Speaking back to what Sean said.
Yeah, I always feel like I have to, when I'm starting on a new project, I have to dedicate like 2 days to just getting all the bad ideas out. It's just like, all right, I'll start one Rhino file that's just all of the garbage ideas, and then take the ones that are okay from my garbage ideas and develop those ones. But yeah, definitely, don't be afraid to have bad ideas, but just be able to recognize when they're bad.
Also, to advocate for that. If you're not around other creatives or other people who are familiar with design, like if people are like, we don't have time for that, say no, stake in the ground, like hold your ground, make space for the bad ideas, because it's critical.
I think I see a lot that students, when they're doing their more advanced design classes at the U of O, they worry about like, oh, is this piece going to be good in my portfolio? Will it help me get a job? And kind of like almost tailor or censor their ideas towards like trying to find a job. And my kind of like take on it is kind of similar to what you were all saying, is that school is the time to do something impractical and exciting and really weird, because you can't always do that when you graduate. But it's also those kinds of projects, I think, do actually, surprisingly, even though they seem completely ridiculous, catch the eye of people who are doing their daily job and aren't able to do fun, creative stuff. And if they see something really interesting, that's probably going to be equally or more, beneficial to your success as trying to do something really conservative with the hope that it's going to like get you just the job that's like right for whatever it is that you were shooting for.
My favorite story of that is I took a drawing assignment for your class. You assigned us to design a tool to a brand. So I made a chainsaw for Barbies, and I had that in the back of my portfolio just to prove like I can render things with markers if that's a skill that you desire. And they spent half of the interview on that drawing, and that's what got me my job, was the Barbie chainsaw.
That's
Oh,
so
man.
funny.
I remember like jet sled gauntlets for a polar bear in Trigva's class. That was fun.
The other thing that you guys mentioned that I think is really interesting is like the feedback side of it and how you are able to adjust or adapt to the kinds of critical feedback that you're getting from clients or from management or from just fellow designers. And I think that's another really tricky one because it kind of requires like setting aside the ego and really trying to like listen to what the feedback is. I think all of us have like our natural defense system in place when we're putting our work out there. And we sometimes even don't hear if someone's trying to be diplomatic and they're trying to give feedback. Sometimes we don't hear what they're really saying because we're kind of like, oh, they liked it or whatever. And we're like, did they really? Like, and getting used to really trying to figure out what it is people are saying and also the strategic part of it. A lot of times, in school, you're designing something for your project. Professionally, oftentimes you're presenting to a client or somebody else, and you don't want to just show them one idea because if they don't like it, then that's a short meeting. Like you want to give them options, and so it's just a kind of interesting shift about like how you present your work, how many ideas you present, and things like that.
If you're going to present things to a tough audience, I think the best thing to do is be prepared with the whys. So again, in a research position, if they're like, why on earth did you do that? Which is a conversation that happens a lot, actually. For us, we're able to turn around and be like, well, users said this. And also here's this whole body of research coming out of conferences going back 6 years where everyone is like, yes, this thing that we're going after is important. So being prepared with the whys, which could be, going back and showing your work, like here are 100 different concepts and we picked these, whatever, for this and that reason. So also being prepared to have a conversation about it, in addition to being open to the feedback, is really helpful, particularly in a professional setting where there's budget on the line.
Yeah, and I've definitely found on occasion, sometimes you need to push people for feedback. Like sometimes people are like afraid to give you feedback, and then later on they sort of realize what they wanted to say, and then it comes in an email like 2 weeks too late, and at that point, the project is further along. So, I've gotten in the habit of when I'm presenting things, I'll be like, all right, here's this chair. It has, this back cushion detail. What do you think about the back? What do you think about the arms? Like, and then sort of like prompting people to give you feedback about details that you have been considering, and allowing people space to sort of talk about your work.
And sometimes they're things that only you care about. Like
It's
they're
true, yeah.
like, I don't really care. They both those patterns look great. Whichever one do you like? And then you're like, ugh, I like them both. So it's sometimes it's really hard to make a decision. For me too, I was thinking that question reminds me of I don't do client work. Like we design for our customers, but ultimately our team makes the decision. And so we're designing for each other in a way, like we're critiquing, we're making decisions together. But I've often found that, and one of the reasons I did product design is you can actually hold products generally like in your hands, or you can like touch them. They're human scale. I wanted to be an architect, but it was just so massive and so conceptual. So you can stand and look at an architectural drawing and like talk about it and like move your hands and talk about the space in that way. And you can do the same thing with product design. You can get trapped in like this whole board of renderings, this whole board of drawings, and you're like talking with your hands and you're like, oh, well, it'll move like this. But in the end, like you could really convince someone better if you just make a really bad model, like a cardboard model that's taped up that actually moves, and like this is how it worked, this is about the size, and they're like, oh, I can see that, because a lot of people can't conceptualize from a picture to 3 dimensions to touching to feeling. And so someone in school said a picture's worth 1,000 drawings and a model's worth 1,000 pictures. So if you can get to a crude model quickly and talk about it and touch it, that's a good place to be with a project.
We have literally pulled Amazon boxes out of the dumpster and like taped them together and be like, here's the idea. Also,
yeah, a lot of the times, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
A lot of the time, you're presenting to people who don't have a design background. There are people from a business background or something else. They're an end client who just wants to own a restaurant. So learning how to present things in a way that doesn't rely on like design terminology or sort of high-minded design thinking, and models really help with that. They're able to look at a thing and be like, oh yeah, I understand what that is. You're not just giving me word pictures. Yeah.
Yeah, when you start talking with your hands, you've lost them, basically.
Yeah, it's like, you gotta stop.
Experiential prototyping it's similar in that you need to make things real enough for people to understand, but very few of the things we do are tangible. It's more questions of like, would you like this AI attempting to help you with this task in the background? So it's always really challenging to think of ways to manifest those things. But I was also going to say the sort of structured critique setup that is in school, at least in my experience, doesn't actually exist in the professional world. So having professional, more experienced people be able to come and give you feedback on your project about how to make it better and the strengths and weaknesses, that's like a luxury. I in my workplace I don't have that, so it's just sort of build a thing and get feedback and hope for the best, but also take full advantage of having access to experts like that. And maybe that's if you're in sort of a more traditional PD job, maybe that's not as much of a thing, but that's definitely been a challenge in my career. And that could also be unique to just my department. Maybe it's not like that in other tech companies, but.
I think you guys have probably already answered some of the next questions, but I'll ask them anyways, because I think, it might be fun to sort of think about. The next one on there was, what qualities do you think make a good designer? And, I think a lot of students think about it like a skill. Like, I need to have this, like, I need to know how to model in Rhino to be a good designer. That may be true, but in a bigger picture, based on your experience working with other people and being a professional, what do you think? What do you think is like some of the key things for being a good designer?
Definitely being comfortable being uncomfortable. Because personally, when I'm in meetings with engineers who have like a PhD in whatever it is they're an expert in, oftentimes there's definitely like a language barrier because I don't speak PhD engineer. But being able to work with people with a completely different set of experiences and backgrounds and stuff like that, and curiosity. So to be able to generate a bunch of ideas and to not be held back by perfectionism. I would say perfectionism is possibly an enemy to good design. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I agree. Totally. I think being present too. So I think if you're present in the moment, like perfectionism doesn't really take hold, because it's more of an experiential thing. Like you are also experiencing the design process. Or like if you go somewhere, like I went to the Japanese garden in Portland with my boss's mentor and my boss, and it was amazing seeing how his mentor interacted with the garden. Like I had gone to the garden many times and like walked through with my daughter and my wife and enjoyed it, but going with these two people, I was in there for like 4 hours and we were looking at every single thing and like discussing like, why do you think that was done that way, or why do you think they chose that thing, or look at this cool thing and look how it moves. And it's almost like when you're present, you start to see how things are made and the connections between things, and then you can draw that into your practice, whatever the problems you're trying to solve. Because if you're like so laser focused on trying to solve something, you're not experiencing the other things around you. And sometimes the solution is right behind you. And if you turn around, you'll see it. But you're so focused on this one thing that you're not being present in your surroundings, and you're not noticing what's right behind you, or right next to you, right in front of you. So yeah, being present, I think is a big part of it.
Yeah, and I think I'm just going to echo what Becky said about working with many different types of people. I think the best designers that I've worked with have worked collaboratively with all the different people on their team really well, and have also had good organizational skills and good project management skills that pair with their design skills. I mean, yeah, working professionally is not just going to be about modeling and drawing, a lot of it is sort of more, not managerial, but yeah, project management. You know, you're trying to figure out all of the nitty gritty details, everything that's not doing drawings. And that's a lot of what getting a product to market or getting a project to the finish line actually is. So, no, I think a good designer is able to see that kind of work, you know, isn't below them. They aren't just a designer. They also need to have different functions within their job.
That skill set, I think, is something that grows on the job, like the project management side of it. But yeah, being able to get work done. And speaking for myself, my work patterns in college, like if your deadline is over here and there's like, here's my amount of work. And to an extent, that also happens in the professional world, just because deadlines are often outside of your control, but possibly working on time management so that maybe maybe it's like, you know, like that instead of don't do that to yourselves.
Yeah, I think that collaboration is something that's really hard to actually, you know, simulate in a school environment, because, you know, teamwork in school is often like challenging or even frustrating if your partner's, you know, like busy and you can't find times to meet and stuff like that. It's very different working with a team of people who have the same goal and everyone's available to meet. And you know, it's I think it's also just like that level of collaboration where the notion of like, you know, I'm like some sort of rock star designer that just like, you know, everyone else is gonna like help to make my vision become a reality is kind of a little bit of a myth. It doesn't really work quite like that in most companies. A lot of times, you know, if you are trying to solve a really specific challenge, collaborating with engineers or collaborating with business people, or, you know, trying to figure out how to address something requires you as a designer to hear what they're saying is going to work, and then figure out how to do that in a way that actually, you know, is helpful to the actual end result being a good design, which oftentimes being flexible and, you know, figuring out ways to incorporate really good necessary feedback into the work. And I think also the diversity of the types of people that you're working with, both in their backgrounds and their age. You know, I think when you're in school, like, you know, for the most part, peers are kind of your same age, and you get out in the world and like you're working with people who are like much older than you are, or like from a totally different discipline, and like, but you're all like teammates. And I think it can be really a little bit like jarring at first, but then it's really exciting because, you know, you're working with people who have great ideas, and it's just a matter of trying to like figure out how you are able to flexibly and productively incorporate all those things into a good project.
I will say getting to do that collaboration is amazing. It's not like, oh, I have to talk to the engineers. It's like, okay, I'm really excited. Let's see how this idea fits with their needs and priorities. So it's not a bad thing. It's wonderful.
Yeah, my favorite day of the week is when my whole team comes together and we lay out all the models and drawings on the table, and we just discuss, and everybody pulls out pens and starts drawing on things and scissors and cutting things up and like taping things together. Like, that's my favorite day of the week for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to have people with other strengths than your own strengths, because oftentimes for designers, like, those are the people who make sure things are gonna be manufacturable, and they're gonna help you like get it built. And like you want to be like really good at working with those people, because that's how things get done. Oops, sorry.
Nice ringtone.
Excuse me. Thanks.
Good design is, equal parts design, and then marketing, and then sort of technical feasibility. All three of those things, and obviously there's more to it, but all three of those things are equally important. So making friends with the people who are in charge of those other two decisions and being able to work flexibly and openly is really important. Also, the rock star mentality thing. I do have a few coworkers who consider themselves to be rock stars, and they're very difficult to work with. So please don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, it is something to think about when you're working with people. It does, I mean, it impacts everybody. The spirit that you bring to work, your willingness to collaborate and be flexible in your approach is important. So I guess you probably already answered this one as well, but maybe just to kind of highlight, what's just each of you can talk about like the thing that gets you the most excited, like when you get to do this on a day, you know, and get paid for it, like what does that look like for you?
Definitely the part where we built a video game for kids and put it in front of kids and they loved it. That was really fun. And it was an augmented reality smart space. So there were so many moving technical pieces and they all worked. Often with tech demos, there's like a curse. So like it works great up until the time you need it to run and then it just doesn't. And so the times that we've gotten really complicated, sophisticated, ambitious prototypes actually working in front of users and we get good feedback, that's one of my favorite things. But in my role, also just getting to go out and meet an incredible variety of people. This has definitely slowed down with COVID, but there have been times where people on my team are flying around the world to find out how people in China feel about this certain technology, how people in Germany feel, what it's like if you're in South America. So getting to imagine the future, make it real in some way. And as someone who likes making stuff, you know, if I've got to fish a box out of the dumpster and tape it together and like wrangle something out of office supplies, and then put it in front of people, like that's really satisfying. I love doing that.
I love it when my team like gets so stoked that we're like high-fiving and like jumping around and like being little kids. At heart, I think my whole team we're all manufacturing nerds. So we love design, but like how things are made is so interesting to us, and working with manufacturers and going and visiting factories and visiting small makers and individuals who are usually making their own products, but also making products for other people. It's just so fun to interact and learn. Like the learning is so exciting to us and we're constantly doing it. And then I would say like visiting users and talking with users and talking with people who are like working from home, which is basically everyone. I enjoy like seeing people's home offices and seeing the chaos and the focus that people bring to their work, and then trying to figure out how to wrangle that chaos and help them be more efficient, or, you know, help them enjoy their space, which will in the end make them hopefully do better work, you know, and really enjoy their work. And so if I'm enjoying my work, I hope other people are enjoying their work too, I guess is what I'm getting at.
For me, I love the concepting phase where I get to start to come up with, you know, my idea for what the product or the space should be, where I'm pulling cool images, you know, I'm like finding all of these awesome references, looking through gallery websites, finding cool details that I want to be able to incorporate into my design. And then also looking at fabrics and finishes, you know, amassing all sorts of materials and getting to lay everything out. Yeah, like Sean was saying, the tactile nature of getting to interact with things it's very satisfying and very fun. And then, you know, the design stage directly after concept is finished, where I get to finally start creating those ideas that I've been sort of brewing up. Getting to start drawing, start modeling things, you know, before I have to start thinking about stupid things like engineering or pricing, you know, when I'm just sort of pie in the sky drawing and modeling. That's probably my favorite part.
I should add a really interesting detail about being in a research lab is that for some people, this is like a major con, but our products don't reach users through the market. It's not like this thing we've been developing for kids is, it'll probably never hit market in the way that it's designed right now. But that also means we don't have a lot of very real market constraints. Like, I don't have to worry that the bill of materials is approaching 20K for one of these systems. It's because it's a research thing, and our deliverables are, presenting at conferences and publishing research papers and getting the technology going enough to give it to someone else, and then they get to worry about those practical things. So in a way, we do get to kind of stay in that pie in the sky space. Like, we're going after like big ideas. Like, what does it mean to have, these mixed reality experiences for children? How does that enhance education through play? I'm trying to think about the other things I can mention. We've also been doing a lot of research into remote work, and asking questions about how do people communicate? What is the emotional ramifications of having this type of experience versus all of us being in the same room and sharing air? So we get to go after really big, exciting, interesting questions. And so, there is less making. I will never like walk into someone's house and be like, oh, look, you have kids space. Like, that's not going to happen. I might be like, yes, you have our whatever like processor in that top. And they'll be like, what are you talking about? So pros and cons to that, but it's kind of I think a unique part of being in a research organization. Also in a company big enough to have them so separated.
Becky, I'm curious what your path was to get to your job that you're in now, since it seems, it's very different from what my path was. I'm just curious.
So I started out at University of Oregon studying architecture, and then again, like Sean was saying, it's big and it's experiential, but I accidentally wandered into the product design office one day and I was like, wow, this is super cool. So I hopped over. But I also spent pretty much all of my time that wasn't on core classes in PD doing digital art coursework. And I would say that their program is sort of like manifested philosophy. So the idea of using technology to explore kind of big themes lined me up really well with the sort of research that we do. And the manager that I had for 6 years until like 3 months ago collaborates a lot with Colin Ives, who's, I think he's still the head of the digital art department. I should know that.
They
Anyway,
rotate, but he's still here.
Yeah. My manager was like, we have 3 days to hire an intern, and Colin was like, take this one. So I think sort of just the sort of philosophical approach of that coursework, supported by the very strategic and real problem solving that PD supplies, just was kind of like a really good fit for that position, or it ended up being. I did actually start in a little bit more of a typical PD role. So they were doing research on sort of smart technology in toys, and Barbie Chainsaw was helpful for that. And also I had a lot of other toy design in my portfolio. So the fact that my portfolio content aligned with some really real work that needed doing. Also, I wasn't interviewed by designers. And I don't actually know how many people from a design background they may have interviewed, just because it's definitely more of an ethnographic research group that I was in. So I think it was just having sort of a collection and a combination of things in my portfolio, and also that background of architecture, which is definitely more of an experiential design, and the digital art, which is a lot more philosophical, I think, in some ways. And then again, the PD to actually back it up and get work done in a very methodical process.
Mm-hmm.
So it was connections and just having the right stuff in my portfolio at the right time.
Yeah.
I think they said luck is the combination of opportunity and preparedness, something like that.
Something like
So
that.
yeah.
Well, we have probably time for one more question, and this is maybe more maybe more abstract, maybe not. I don't know if there really is an answer to this, but I thought maybe each of you could talk about if you see any changes that are happening in the field of product design. and what those might be, or maybe there's no changes. I don't know. I mean, but just generally speaking, do you see any things that seem to be evolving, or you're noticing in your daily routine, like, oh, this is something we never used to do, or this is something that, is different? I'm just kind of curious about that.
I can't really comment on product design because I'm not a product designer, but in the field of user experience design, I feel like that's kind of almost a buzzword right now. Like UX is really hot, but UX is kind of an umbrella term that covers many, many, many flavors of design. And I actually suspect that maybe 10 years from now or something, that UX design won't be like the hot thing. Maybe they'll have sort of separated that into the UI design, the front end development, the back end development, the interaction design, all the things that kind of fall under the UX umbrella. I'm hoping that in time they'll get a little bit more specific about what that job means. I forget where I was going with that, but yeah, my guess is that the field will get a little bit more specific about what they're looking for. Because I'll get on, LinkedIn or whatever and just look at what jobs are available in UX, and they'll all be called UX design, but then what they're actually asking for can vary quite a bit. Sometimes what they want is a researcher, sometimes what they want is a developer, but there are a lot of things that fall under UX.
I've definitely noticed the pandemic is pushing a lot of changes in design. But something I've been noticing, like mostly on the blogs and just reading articles and discussing it with my team and meeting with manufacturers, is sort of a materials renaissance in a way. People are exploring all sorts of new alternative mixed materials. And at Grove, we have a very limited palette. Like we kind of stick with what we do, but we're always looking to grow it like very intentionally. And so we always have our eye on like all these different materials that people are using and different techniques to make things. And so there's just a lot of really interesting stuff going on with materials right now, and how to use them and how to put them together. So that's been fun. Other changes, with working from home, you don't have to necessarily move to the place that you need to work now. But that makes collaboration a bit more difficult. So in the studio, I would usually have a bunch of big 4x8 foam core boards, and the whole process was pinned up. And this was pre-pandemic, like everything, all the research design was printed, pinned, and discussed in that way. And now within the last year, actually, we started using a program called Miro. So I'm seeing a lot of new collaboration software come out, and everyone's trying to do it. They're all okay, a little bit clunky, but Miro has seemed to be like, it's way overbuilt, but we've found a really cool way to use it for our design team. And so just the ability, it's so good that we actually use it when we're in person. Like we're all sitting on our iPads and we're just like drawing in Miro or posting things. And so through the pandemic, like the software has really changed, and I'm really excited about like how it's changed our collaboration and the ability to collaborate with people even outside of our team. Like there was this one guy we were collaborating with, and he was seeing us literally sketching live on his screen, and he was so amazed because he likes to sketch, but he almost had that fear too of like doing a bad sketch. And we were just like throwing down bad sketch after bad sketch. And he was like, whoa, your guys' sketches are really messy and awesome. And it like made him more comfortable to like just go for it. And I think, yeah, the software unlocked that for all of us. And that was really cool. I'd always been more of like a physical person. And now the software has been winning me over lately.
We use Miro too on a daily basis, or at least I do.
Yeah, my brother works at Dolby, and their team uses it too for collaboration. He lives here where I am in Hawaii right now, and Dolby's in San Francisco. So he's collaborating with his marketing team and doing graphic design for displays and signage and stuff like that. So it's a pretty cool tool. Lots of people are using it.
The admin used to get mad at me for using up all the Post-it notes in like the office supply cabinet, and now they can't tell me to stop. I can have unlimited Post-its.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I was just going to say really quickly that I feel like consumers and clients are a lot more becoming a lot more tuned into design, just because of Instagram. Everybody has unlimited access to seeing what good design looks like. And I think it makes their expectations higher, and it also sort of makes them more open to sort of a more diverse group of aesthetics. It's like if you look at any sort of large direct-to-consumer furniture company, like there's a lot more crazy things happening on those like big corporate scales that I think is really interesting. And I think Instagram and social media has really driven that sort of change, at least in furniture.
Great. Well, it's 11 o'clock now. Perfect time for us to open up the floor to questions. If any of our audience would like to raise their hand, they're welcome to just unmute and shout out a question, but it's optional, obviously. Do you guys have questions? While we're waiting for three, here we go. William. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Hello. So when it comes to, as you discussed before, the benefits of remote working, I've learned this in an interview that I've posited previously. So this isn't so much of a question as it is just a tip. But as far as I've learned, so when it comes to remote work, I've also put this in the chat. So there's also so yeah, I can understand and acknowledge that there are some pretty handy benefits when it comes to working remotely. And of course, there's also like the regional work cultures that those particular jobs follow in principle. And some of those work cultures, they can have different perspectives within the creative freedoms they employ towards how they handle things, and also how their employees are allowed to handle things. And when considering those sorts of work cultures and such, considering how the pandemic has went for you, how has that affected you in the remote work you've done?
So my job is, before the pandemic, we're on computers all of the time, and there would be days where it's just literally 9 to 5 meetings. Like, you want lunch? Too bad, meetings. So in some ways, the remote work has been really nice because it allows for a little bit more flexibility. However, it's been an interesting challenge for design, because a lot of really interesting collaborations came from me, like walking by someone's cubicle and being like, what on earth are you doing in there? And then we start a conversation. They're like, oh, if only I could make this custom piece. And I'm like, I know where the 3D printers are. Let me help you. So there's definitely a really interesting limit on just sort of like hallway conversations and bumping into people. Your professional circle shrinks considerably because it's really rare to, or at least in the research that we've done, because again, we did a lot of interviews and stuff about remote collaboration. It's just kind of difficult to reach out to people for, just chit chatting. You don't run into people anymore. There's none of those serendipitous, the coffee room chats or whatever.
It feels a little bit more restrictive in getting the opportunity to like know your other fellow employees.
Yeah, people aren't bumping into each other and just having like a random conversation. Like, let's just pretend Sean also worked out of my office and I see him walking by with some cardboard thing that he's constructed. And I'm like, hey, what are you doing there? And sometimes those connections lead to really interesting and significant collaborations. So, and there's also, of course, the challenge of communication when you're through, these virtual things. Like at my company, we do not have a video culture. When I remembered, like, oh no, I have to have video on this morning, I gotta go move my laundry. Communication gets a lot more difficult. So I think that professionally, it does, on the one hand, it shrinks the scale of your serendipitous ways of collaborating. There's a gym in my office, and that was actually literally my biggest networking tool, was just running into people from, because everyone across the company would go there. And so a bunch of these design talks or collaborations with people in like HR or in, working on validating processors on their way out the door. A lot of that stuff came from those really informal networks. So that's difficult. But at the same time, I also have access to people much farther away. So now it's like no big deal for me to call someone in China or Arizona or, people totally far away. Also, I personally like seeing my coworkers' pets, but I don't know if that's unprofessional.
Oh, everyone loves that.
So I guess there are some benefits when it comes to remote work, although I guess, as I'm sure most people share, I guess it comes down to sorry, the ability to, when you're working remotely, it's also serious to have the ability to manage your time on your own, while also, well, I guess while working remotely, handle your responsibilities by yourself. And yeah, so it comes down to working much more independently without
Yeah.
being in a systemic work environment. And
I
so
would-
sometimes
I will admit, oh, I'm so sorry. I keep interrupting you. I think there's lag. Go ahead.
I think sometimes it can be beneficial to have that flexibility in working in the responsibilities that you want, but it's also difficult that when you're handling more serious matters, it's much more difficult, especially if you have some experience
Yeah.
in that.
There's also some situations like that we identified, and this is published, so I can talk about it. So collaboration, but also meetings that have emotionally sensitive content. So for example, we interviewed a doctor who was often delivering really heavy information to cancer patients, and doing that over Zoom was just not the same experience at all of having that sort of in-person
It doesn't feel
caretaker and
right.
provider relationship. And I don't know how applicable that is to design, but there's just a certain level of connection that's very difficult to recreate through these digital barriers.
Yeah, it just doesn't have the same weight to it.
No.
Um,
Also, yes, the
I think-
temptation to whip out the phone with no one walking by my
Yeah.
cube to see that is higher.
I think working from home created some really interesting limitations though for design. Like you had to be able to output the same quality of work, but with very limited tools and very limited
Yeah.
resources. And I
Especially-
actually have found through the pandemic too, like say you're at a job 8 to 5 or whatever, 9 to 5. Usually for me, I do my best work in the morning when I'm like, I just wake up and I've had some coffee and some good breakfast. And then right around the time that 2 or 3 rolls around, like I'm not, my output is not good. Like and when I was at the office all day, like I just had to push through that. But now that I work from home, it's like, oh, I can just walk away from work for a couple hours. And then like after my daughter goes to bed, I can maybe come back to it when I'm fresh again, like in the evening, because usually like after my daughter goes to bed, I'm more focused and I can do that stuff. And so it depends on the workplace, but like if your workplace is flexible with the hours you can work, you can actually work at your peak energy times, which is really nice. And that was something I didn't realize. I always felt like I had to push through it, but now I can like kind of tailor the day to when I'm most engaged in design.
Yeah.
I see here, Matthew's got a question he's been waiting patiently to ask.
Shall I? Okay, so I guess I'll leave it to Matthew then.
Well, yeah, we can pick this up if we still have time after Matthew's question.
Of course. Thank you for getting the time to listen.
Yeah.
Matthew? Right there. I see that you're unmuted, but we cannot hear you. Tech issues. Okay.
Also, yes, that is a downside to the hybrid work.
Mhm. Slow internet.
Just all the various things that can go wrong.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have multiple mute buttons and I have to make sure they all work. So I have a dog and he freaks out about mailmen and there's mail people outside right now. So I apologize. My question and interest is largely towards Becky's side, just specifically with Intel. I have a background in engineering and I worked at Lam Research for a while, and I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they make a lot of the machines that Intel uses to make their semiconductors. So I was very more familiar with Intel in general. And I was just kind of interested if they do a lot of internships with like general designers, or like the best way to like find if they are doing anything or if anything's available. Just because like working with that kind of specifically like AR or any like VR stuff
Mhm.
has been very interesting, and just trying to see where it's going in the industry.
So I will say, first of all, having the combination of some type of technical background combined with design is like, that is a really, really good combination to have right now. I had a colleague with like a computer science undergrad and then like a year-long, I think it was a master's in HCI. And anyway, the guys, people are trying to poach him left and right. Like twice a month, he's having emails from like Facebook and Google, like, hey, you want to come work for us? So that is a really good combination to have, is some amount of technical something to support the design. In terms of getting a position at Intel itself, if you want to reach out to me one-on-one, I can kind of poke around some of my internal channels. I will say that Intel is first and foremost a hardware manufacturing company. So I think we have 110,000 employees, and we have a Teams channel where all of the designers congregate and do design things. And I think there's like 80 people in there. So out of 110,000 employees, the design community is really, really tiny. I'm one of 3 designers in a 900-person business group. So
Yes.
design can be challenging. However, like if you reach out to me personally, I can talk to you about specific business groups where there might be internship opportunities. I absolutely cannot promise anything.
Right.
Because it's just, as the need arises. Also, Intel changed their intern policy so that you can only hire interns if you can increase headcount. So, hire another full-time position. And so that has somewhat limited intern positions, but that was before COVID. So maybe it's different now. But yeah, that combination of skill sets, I think, will serve you very well if you're headed into tech.
Awesome.
I don't know if that's helpful, but
Oh, it is. And I also just wanted to make sure I was after I asked the question, I realized it might be sounding like I'm asking for something specific, but yeah, just like the general opportunities and where they are, because sometimes just finding where the opportunities are is the difficult part. What is the best way to contact you outside of this email?
Yeah, is it possible?
Why don't you send me an email and we'll follow up.
Yeah, and then we can connect with the Intel email addresses. My email
Excellent.
is very long, so I don't want to throw it into the void just yet, but
Thank you.
yeah.
Other questions? We've got time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions if we have them. We don't have to go all the way to 11:30 either. Hopefully, while we're waiting to see if there's any last momentary questions, hopefully those of you who are interested have signed up for an opportunity to meet with one of our alumni later today for a portfolio review. I'm not sure what the status is on the, how many slots there are or whether there's any openings, but I hope that's something that you're all taking advantage of, and that's another good place to meet people more like one-on-one and get some good feedback about what you're doing and your thoughts about finding internships or like how your portfolios looks to somebody with fresh eyes. So I hope that people are considering signing up for that. I don't see any other questions. Are there any other parting comments that any of our panelists would like to make before we sign out?
I do have one big comment that is my request to all of you as the Blossom design community, because I have in the past been the person deciding on what intern we were going to hire, or if there's more design work than I can take on, it's been my responsibility to go find contractors. And it's actually kind of really hard to find people. So if you're looking for jobs, making yourself findable and then also having updated work on whatever website or portfolio that you have, and also being responsive over email within like 48 hours, because finding someone with updated work that aligned with what we needed, who actually responded to emails in time, like that has been our bar sometimes for hiring people. And it's surprising because it sounds not super professional, but literally just being prepared in case someone tries to reach out. That's been a barrier before.
Grove doesn't really do internships anymore, but we always have our doors open for people to come by and talk about design, see our facilities, just learn and get inspired, basically. And, you know, we're in the Portland community, so we know a lot of the different businesses that are there for, you know, your BFA years, or if you end up living in Portland. The community of design in Portland is really tight. Like even, you know, Becky's teams at Intel, like we know those people, and then like Herman DeHooge and like all those guys that Becky worked with. And so like the community is really tight. And once you get plugged in at the BFA, you're going to meet so many different cool people, but everyone loves like meeting students and giving tours and talking and doing portfolio reviews on the sly. So I won't be here later today, but if you guys want to hit me up, I'd be happy to do a portfolio review some other time.
My parting comment is that you should never be afraid to reach out to a designer or a firm or a company that you're really interested in, because in my experience, most design jobs, especially at smaller places, are not posted online, and they're going to have to be something, you know, that you seek out. Yeah, so definitely don't be afraid to do it. You know, people aren't going to judge you for sending a weird email or something like that. You know, it's like, it's definitely one of the most important parts of getting a design job is cold calling.
The weirder, the better.
Save the weird. Don't put the weird in your interview, though. We've had some wild interviews.
Yeah, don't be weird in the interview.
Yes, and don't do it there. Yeah, everyone I know loves talking to students and having those conversations, so don't be shy.
Yeah, it's kind of like something I think a lot of students don't realize is you've got a special like student status because you're kind of like fresh, and you know, you don't know all of the norms and the social things or the way stuff's supposed to work, and people remember when they were students and how challenging it was. So oftentimes you get like, you know, people empathizing with your situation, and people will be generous if you reach out to them and with the right spirit. So I think that's probably a good place to wind things up. I really want to thank everyone who came to join us today, all the students, and especially our panelists. It's such a pleasure to see you all again and hear your insights. And this is just like a highlight when we get to do this. So thank you all for participating.
Yeah, thank you. It's so good to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it. Show's over, folks. Have a great rest of your day. And a good
Bye.
weekend.
So long.
Bye. Well,